let's jump down to this Vox Adpocalypse, because this is actually gonna loop in super well. I didn't know that this is gonna happen, but like we talked about with, I think, the big games journalism and media companies pushing back on a lot of these YouTubers that are coming up and being negative or pushing back on some of these products that we've got in the gaming industry. I think that, this also kind of happened in just like political media as well with this Vox Adpocalypse. And I know there's a lot to this, but if you haven't heard, I'm sure you have before, this all stemmed from the Steven Crowder and the Carlos Maza debate. And it all came down with some words that were said, I think on both sides. But it's caused YouTube to crack down even further on its policies surrounding what is hate speech and what's permissible on the site. And me personally, I mean, you guys can, I guess, say whatever you want, but just putting politics aside, I think the big issue here is just how we feel about these giant tech companies and platforms censoring and choosing what speech is acceptable and what is not. And me personally, I especially don't like the knee-jerk reaction of YouTube and other platforms where they get this complaint from, a journalist or whoever, and all of a sudden they go in and like change all of their policies just based on like this one person giving pushback. And it just doesn't really make much sense to me as like a policy for a giant company.
Yeah. Well, you said it. I mean, but it really isn't just one person. It's a giant
It's Vox
company or group of companies putting pressure on YouTube, to make these decisions. Regardless of what was said, I'm not sure that that YouTube, obviously you would want some amount of policing, I guess, but
No.
I, I'm not sure how much that is, and I feel like less is more in this case. The less restriction, the less policy enforcement, I guess, that less ambiguity. I should say, more clear cut rules on what's acceptable and what isn't, and less of this. You know, case by case. We decide. We're God here. We decide who can stay and who can leave, who makes money here and who doesn't. On how we're feeling that, apparently that day, because one day they decide one thing and the next they're like, oh, well, you know, obviously Fox and everybody got their nails into them and they said, well, we'll demonetize, this person for you. Does that make everybody feel better now about this situation?
Yeah.
Just kind of silly.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than silly. It's incorrect. These are not the way that these companies should be handling these things. There's factions going against each other. Steven Crowder and political. It's conservative, and Carlos Maza, who is complete liberal. They of course they're gonna have issues with each other. Like the YouTube should ignore this shit. Like this should not be an issue. Like it's basically they have to choose a side, and that's not correct for a company that's trying to make money. We're talking about like everything that we were talking about earlier kind of goes in with this because this is what's happening in the video game, and it's starting to be integrated into the video game industry as well. As it's like pick your faction, like, and we know which faction it's gonna be.
Right. Well, then when we don't speak to, like, this is more politically charged, this whole thing, but like, we don't speak to that, but we do, and we did speak about how, these big companies, not Fox in particular, but like the Kotakus of the world and stuff are kind of, fighting back against the little guy on YouTube, that are kind of getting some traction with their, maybe
I
sometimes
gotta
negative.
push back on that a little bit. He's a little
What's
guy,
that?
Steven Crowder.
Oh, I mean,
I
yeah,
mean, in
but I mean, in our case,
comparison to amount
gaming.
of money that Fox has, because
Yeah,
they have people supporting them with political aims. But so
yeah.
does Steven Crowder. The main point that I'm trying to get at is, in the case of this particular debate that spurred on the Vox Adpocalypse, this shouldn't fucking be happening, in my opinion. And to anybody who's reasonable and wants things to be fair, YouTube, let people say whatever the fuck they want to say. Like I don't get it. Like keep everybody in plain sight. as long as people aren't posting videos where they're naked or they're espousing violence on people or
Yeah.
whatever,
That's
like
my big question, Ben. It's like,
yeah.
why can't these big companies just rely on the First Amendment as like a shield for what can be said on their platform and what can't? And they don't have to decipher anything further than that. They just say, like, this is the Constitution of the United States. We're in the United States. We follow these policies. You can't, yell fire in a crowded theater, and you can't on Twitter, and you can't, and you can't cause or incite violence towards an individual person or a company or something. You can't say that you want to kill someone or something, or you want like a mob to go after somebody, and that's the line.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't be hard to do that.
Yeah, it would not at all. It'd be the easiest route in my opinion, but the thing is, are they trying to force people? And that's the whole big thing from the conservative or anybody on the right, is they're trying to force people because they know that this is the future. They're trying to control all the media because they want their people to get in office and their policies to go through and everything. But is that really happening? Or are these, I've heard you talk a lot about this, Matt, is like these companies are beholden to the money. So is there some way that if they choose this route that they're making more money somehow? Like, is that what's the big thing? Like
I
it
don't
doesn't seem
know.
like it would be to me.
I mean, yeah, usually I think that, I usually say it, but I mean, Dave's usually the one that says this too. Is just that, like I think that when you like can't figure out why something is happening, it's usually financially related. But I don't know like who the investors are, or who owns shares of what companies. I have no idea.
Well, then there's also the theory that a lot of these people are, that are in the huge tech companies are just liberal minded and they have a bias. So of course they're going to go with Fox and Mazda and say, yeah, he's off, or yeah, he's going to make less money on our platform because we don't like him. There's that theory, and I don't necessarily believe in. I believe in I believe what Matt was saying. Let's just do it. The bare minimum, First Amendment, real simple, like. But there are these theories out there.
Well, the biggest issue is that they're like you know what I mean, like the media companies or the companies in control of their sites or whatever. They're not looking at it objectively. They're taking a side, and that's what the problem is, because they're y- like they have a subjective view of the situation and they pick a side, which in their situation they shouldn't do that,
Hmm.
because I think it's safe to say that with the publicity this is getting, and like everybody knows about like what's happening in regards to like censorship and stuff on different social media platforms and websites, blah blah blah. There's there's going to be an issue where these big companies, like, you know what I mean, Facebook, Twitter, blah blah, like they have, like, you know what I mean, they have like immunity. They're considered like a social platform, so they're allowed to do whatever, and it's eventually gonna get to the point where like it's gonna go to the Supreme Court and they're gonna say, hey, like, you guys are no longer a protected platform because
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know what I mean, you're not.
Well,
That's gonna cause some issues.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And like these companies just want to say that they're like private companies, and that, and to a certain extent, like, yeah, you're a private company and you can do what you want. But I would argue that a company like YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, they have more influence on like politics and people's everyday lives than like the government does.
Oh yeah.
To a certain extent. So like they don't get to well, they do get to decide, but they shouldn't get to decide what should be like, what is like hate speech, or what should be on there and what shouldn't be on there. They're almost like, they should almost be like some sort of public utility, because they have too much influence over people at this point. There's too many users.
Yeah, and it's funny that we're talking about, the government ending up having to do something. I mean, well, the courts, the Supreme Court having to do something, because I think we're all in agreement, but that's like the last thing we want is the government making decisions
I
on
think
this.
they have to. I
Yeah,
actually would
eventually.
want them to here because I
I'm
don't know
just
what
saying
else.
it's kind
I
of
don't know what else they can do.
contradictory to what we usually are.
Yeah.
But it's startling the discrepancies and the discrepancies of how these companies are handling these issues. They had said when this came out, and I don't, we're talking about this broadly. We don't want to like pinpoint the things, but I think it's important to, if people aren't familiar with this, they had put out initially that he didn't do anything to breach their terms and services or anything like that. Like if you say that and it's been reviewed and we know that you've taken a hard look, you can't turn that back. What does that say about you when you turn that back? Like it's despicable, like you could maybe say, oh, we made a bad decision on that, and okay, but we can't revert it because we have to go by what we say, and when we make a statement like that, we have to go by it. They can say that, but they can't take it back and then take his ads off. You know what I mean? Like it's pitiful in my opinion.
Right. I mean, they did clearly state that he didn't violate, what was it, like their community guidelines, something like that, that there was nothing there. They couldn't really do anything about it. And it should have just been like, slap them both on the wrist, like,
Yeah.
time out, children, like go to your corners for a little bit. Like you're having a public like pissing match between you two, and then you're going to get a bunch of, I don't know, where you're going to get your company and the platform to try and back each side up. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
This whole thing is like really,
it's
really
despicable.
silly.
and it's gonna come down to like right now, you know what I mean? Right now they're protected. So like if a user like types like death threats and then they go shoot up a school or something, or people stumble upon, terrorist propaganda or blah blah blah, it's currently it's not their problem. Like they're
Yeah.
protected. Like they're
Mhm.
protected by they're not responsible for what users say on their platform, right?
Mhm.
But like if they're gonna keep making judgments
Yes.
and like taking sides and censoring people like not fairly, it's gonna go to the Supreme Court, and then they're no longer gonna be protected, and then they're gonna run into some big time issues because they're not gonna be, you know what I mean? They're gonna be responsible for what people say on their platform.
Yeah, well, they better switch their fucking tactics and go straight to what we're talking, which is First Amendment, because the just bare minimum First Amendment shit, because they're gonna have more problems with not protected than they would have if
Exactly.
they're in their protected status. So it really doesn't make sense for them to continue down the route that they're
Right,
going. That
and at the end of the day, like, regardless of your political affiliations, you should always err on the side of free speech. Like, there's no reason like, if you actually care about
yes,
people's rights and whatnot, then you should always it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Even if it doesn't align even if your whatever view and the opposite viewpoint is being suppressed, you shouldn't want that as somebody that, like, wants free speech and wants equality. You shouldn't want that. That should still be against.
Right. Unless
did
you
you
do
see
have
this?
unless you do have a political agenda, and then if you do, then just come out and tell everybody. But don't like hide behind it and say that you're an open platform that anybody can say whatever they want on, because it's not
Right.
true.
yeah.
It's like false
And
advertising, actually.
and one other thing that I wanted to say, which we can leave this because I don't want to get into too detail to this, but really what it comes down to is like when you realize like people who were involved in this they were just using bad faith tactics, where it's like if you're supporting the Mazda part of it, Steven Crowder, whatever, he shouldn't have said what he said. I think he has the right to say what he said, but like morally, whatever, he shouldn't have said what he said. But the reaction and the persistence and the way that they went about it, and et cetera, like you're trying. Somebody makes a living YouTube, and they are doing everything possible for them to not make that living anymore. And that's what it comes down to. It's like that's when I hear people it's like similar to when I hear people at work, they're like, oh, they don't do anything, they should lose their fucking job. I'm like, well, no, they should get called the fuck out. They shouldn't lose their job. You know what I mean? Like, they should be called out and like reprimanded. And if they continue to do it, strikes, whatever. Like, I'm going on a rant now, but it's just it's always like mind blowing to me when people are just like, they should just lose their job. It's like, fuck, man. Like, what if they got a family? You know what I mean? Like,
You know what's mind blowing to me? Did you see at the end of that Newsweek article, they talk about Quentin Hoover?
Well, what they say?
He's apparently a YouTuber, over 300,000 subscribers. Quentin Reviews. I was looking at his channel. I'd never heard of him. So, he touches on Star Wars Galaxy, Disney parks, Garfield movies, Blue's Clues. That's his
He does it
recent.
all.
Blues,
That's his-
damn.
That's his recent stuff. But they got his take on this, and essentially, he's talking about like the success of extremist YouTubers like Crowder and stuff like that. But then and then he gets into the law aspect of it. I thought it was funny. It was a quote. Which he says, there's nothing in any law which states that a private corporation has to allow any person a public platform to do or say anything.
Yeah, that's
just
exactly
like-
what I said. Yeah, right.
Right.
It's
so
hilarious.
Who is this guy? One, why am I taking Blue's Clues dude's opinion on Newsweek? But why do you need him to be like your little puppet
Yeah, I
to
don't know
say
what that
what
is.
you guys wanted to say? I don't. It's weird. I'm sure he's
Yeah.
fine, and nothing against him. I mean, I'm sure he's really entertaining. You have 300,000 subscribers. That's awesome. But why are you speaking to this? What does this have to do? This is not your expertise. I
Yeah,
would
well,
think.
Yeah, I mean, we could literally go on about
Yeah, right. And
it's something that's important to us because we're on
Uh-huh.
the platform and we have our own views, and that like like we could say something silly or that we don't mean, and then before you know it, or at least at the minimum, the video is taken down.
We'll probably be gone as soon as we put this up.
Yeah,
right.
just for me saying that.
Yeah, we're gone.
Dissenting.
See,
thing.
we just dissipate. It's
Yeah,
like
I don't feel
we
so
we
good.
we combust. Is that what is it? Spontaneous combustion.
Yeah.
There's people
Yeah.
that just combust. It just happens to us.